Hi everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to help support the show by becoming a premium member, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast to sign up. Memberships are only $2.99 a month. By becoming a premium member, you'll be able to download episodes onto your mobile device and listen to them commercial-free wherever you go. Also, if you'd like to check out the new Dogman Encounters t-shirt store, please go to dogmanencounters.com/store and take a look around. Buying a t-shirt or sweatshirt there is another great way to help support the show. As always, thanks for listening. For the first segment of tonight's show, our guests are Ed and Tori. Ed and Tori, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Oh, you're welcome. Tori, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I'm 37 years old. I have one son. I'm from Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan.
All right, Ed, please do the same.
My name is Ed. I'm 44 years old. I'm from Perkins, Michigan. I have one son, and he's ready to graduate.
Since both of you are from Michigan, did you know about Dogman before you had your encounter?
Yes.
I didn't.
Oh, so you didn't know about it. Was it like a slap in the face or what when you finally saw one?
Yeah, it actually was. I didn't know what to think at first. Werewolf came to mind, but I knew that those weren't real, so it kind of got me thinking of what it could be. And I had all kinds of thoughts going through my mind.
Oh, I'm sure you did. I can only imagine. Ed, your encounter happened right outside a place called Dutch Mills, Michigan. What can you tell us about the place?
Well, Dutch Mills is a little town just north of Rapid River, Michigan. And it's a place that has a natural spring that people have been going to for several years.
Tori, what kinds of resources are in that area that would cater to a Dogman?
I would say the fresh spring, the water, the woods. There's lots of trees, and there's not many people or houses. So basically it's, fields and trees and fresh water, and maybe they would just, be able to hide out or drink from the spring or just, live in the woods.
From the way you described the place, I'll bet the place is infested with deer too, isn't it?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of deer. Definitely a lot of deer. They're everywhere. Deer. There's a lot of other animals, I'm sure, too. Wolves are throughout, the whole UP. I don't know if there's a lot of them in that area, but I do know that there are some in different spots. They have different packs. I don't exactly know the names of the packs.
Sounds like a perfect habitat. How do you find out about the show, Tori?
We saw an ad or a page on Facebook about it, and we decided to share our encounter.
As we established just a bit ago, you already knew about Dogman before you had your encounter, Ed, but what were your thoughts on their existence before you saw that one with your own eyes?
I believe that there are things out there that try not to be seen, but I also believe that we haven't really seen all the animals that are actually out there. So I wasn't really surprised that I seen something like that. I was just surprised to see actually what it would look like when I did see it.
Oh, I'm sure you were. All right, Ed, please tell us about your encounter. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay, it was early November of 2008. It was just starting to snow. It was cold. There was already frost on the ground. I was going north on US 241, coming from a little town called Gladstone, Michigan. It was fairly late at night. It was past midnight. And I seen a carcass of an animal on the side of the road. So I immediately slowed down because usually when you see one, there's more. And when I slowed down, I noticed I noticed it was a wolf, but the strange thing was that it was decapitated. Just a little farther up the road, I seen something off to the side of the road that was out of the ordinary. It was huge, and it had the wolf's head in its mouth. This creature was anywhere between, my guess would be 12 and 15 feet long, and it was built very, very muscular, and it had long back legs that were bent, like the opposite direction. The torso was like a gorilla's, real thick, real muscular, had shorter arms in the front, but the thing that was really, really creepy about it, it actually had a wolf's head on its body. And this thing was long. And when we come up to it, when it leaped from the woods, it cleared both lanes of the highway with the wolf's head still in its mouth. And by the time I slowed down on the highway, I had noticed this thing had turned around and it looked dead at us in the car. It was me and my wife and my sister, and we were in the car. We were going up to visit a friend in Marquette. And I'll never forget the thing because it just, something you'd never expect to see.
Oh, that goes without saying. You said you slowed down to take a better look at it. How close were you to it when you slowed down to do that, Ed?
I wasn't more than 20 feet away from it.
Yeah, that's close. Way too close for comfort. You said you were 20 feet away from it at that point. Was that as close as you ever got to it, or did you get closer?
I was not approaching that thing. We were safe in our car, and if it would have made a move towards me, I would have accelerated on the pedal and got out of there.
Oh, I'm sure you would have. You just mentioned that your sister was with you. How did she respond when all this was going on?
My sister don't want to think about it even. She has a fear. And her take on it is that it's evil. My take on it is it's just like it was wondering the same thing about us.
Now that you've seen one, what do you think dogmen are, Torrey?
I don't quite know exactly what they are. Like I said, a lot goes through your head when you see something like that. My first thought would have been werewolf. And then, there's government experiments that go wrong, or hybrid wolves, or, I don't really know what to think. I know it's not no Bigfoot. I see Bigfoot as something different. Obviously, the way you see it in movies or the way you see it in videos or hear about that description, I don't think it would be anything close to a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. But I really don't know what to think it was, other than, the Dogman, or a Dogman.
Ed's already gone on the record to state that he doesn't think it's an evil entity. He thinks it's just a creature that's out there trying to make a living. What's your take on that?
I don't see it as evil. I would see it as something that would just be, not really normally living out there. You don't see many of them, or you don't often, it's not like everybody sees one often like they would a deer. But I think it would just, either it was feeding, or even if it wasn't feeding, it would be hunting, or, looking for the next place to move to make a new home, or, I really don't know any other reasons why it would be out there or around there.
Well, there are a lot of theories about what they are, supernatural or flesh and blood. I wish I could say for sure what they are, but I'd be lying if I did say that I could do that. How fast were you going when you first saw it, and how slow were you going when you were taking a look at it, Ed?
Well, I was going 55 or 60 miles an hour on the highway. That's the speed limit on that highway. And I slowed down to about 15 when I seen it, and almost to a stop when it turned around and looked at us before I sped off.
So you slowed way down then?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd say you did. When it jumped into the woods, do you think it did that because of you, or do you think it was going to do that anyway, Torrey?
Well, maybe it was because of us, but if it was feeding, like the wolf's head was in its mouth, if it was feeding, then it would probably be heading off into the woods to eat it, or I kind of wonder why it only took the head, but, there's a lot of questions that go through your mind about this whole thing anyway. So I don't know if it was because we were there or, we kind of snuck up on it, or if it was just taking off to finish eating or to bury it or, and come back for the rest. Territorial. I don't know what else it would be.
This sounds like you read my mind. I was going to ask you, why do you think it would have left with that wolf's head and left the body behind? After all, if it was looking for sustenance, it would have gone for the body, not the head.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I thought too after the fact, because there's not a lot of meat in the head. Obviously, it's the head. There's organs in the body, there's the meat, there's, everything else that's left to it. So why would it just take the head and leave? I don't really know the answer to that question myself, but it is something that I think a lot of people would probably wonder about if they did see that.
When you think about it that way, you just might have driven it off.
Yeah, that might just be.
Yeah, that might be. How would you describe its eyes, Ed?
Well, when that creature turned around and looked at me, they were almost, I'd have to say it was a goldish green, the way I seen his eyes off the reflection from the lights off the car. They were big eyes. It was creepy. And it looked like it was looking right through me.
Did the eyes seem like they were backlit or just the typical reflections you would expect to see?
Not a typical reflection, because I used to drive the highways all the time. And I've seen many, many, many different sorts of animals. But this one had its own deep set of eyes. Very intimidating eyes.
Yeah, that they do. You have a friend who had some things to share with you about Dogman, Ed. What did he have to say about them?
He said that they were very territorial and that they lived in packs and that they eat off the land and drink water from the creeks and the rivers.
How does he know all this? Has he had his own run-ins with them?
He's an old hunter from Rapid River, and to this day, he won't go into certain parts of the woods where he lives alone because of it.
Yeah, sounds like he just might have had some run-ins then. From what I understand, that area had quite a few missing person reports at one time. What more can you tell us about that, Torrey?
That I really don't think he would have anything to do with that, but it may have. I really didn't read into other people's encounters enough, I guess, to say that maybe they thought the same thing if it would be in the areas where they've seen them. I don't know. I really just don't think that it would have anything to do with that. I think if it would have, maybe the thing would have not stopped and just kept on going, that maybe it would have turned around and tried to attack even though we were in the car.
Well, regardless, thank goodness you were in the car that night. Ed, you and your father were hunting one time when you discovered something unusual. Please expand on that for us.
Me and my father were hunting up in Torrey, Michigan. I was a young teenager at the time. We stumbled across the remains of a human laying in a creek bed. It was a young woman, and she was very deteriorated at the time and decomposed. And we had reported it to the state police, but they had never found out who had done it. And never found the reason or why she was in the position she was at.
How long do you think her body had been there?
I believe she had been there for months. Parts of her body were missing from animals eating off of her. And there's a certain, I think it's called putrefaction. There's a fatty substance that when a body decomposes, it creates a fatty substance. And she was past that point.
Oh, yeah, sounds like she must have been there for a while. Your family on Drummond Island used to share ominous stories with you, Ed. What kinds of things did they tell you about?
On Drummond Island, they spoke of shapeshifters. They spoke of things that come out at night. They spoke of wolves a lot. And there was plenty of deer. So if you were young or you were disabled or not able to handle yourself and you didn't have a rifle, you didn't go out in the woods that night.
Sounds like an awfully creepy place to me. Goodness gracious. I can understand why they wouldn't go out at night. Bouncing back to your encounter, from top down, please describe the creature you saw as accurately as you can for us, Ed.
The creature I'd seen that night was really hairy and muscular, from 12 to 15 feet in length. It had paws of a dog. It had the head of a wolf, but the body, the shape of the chest and the back legs, the chest was more built than a gorilla's chest. And the back legs were bent the other way, but they were extremely long. Remember the ears? The ears were straight up and pointy. And then the eyes, when it looked at me, the eyes were like a glowing goldish green color. They were set far apart, because I could tell it was a large animal. And the only thing I got from it, from being in the car, I got fear. I was in fear.
Oh, I'm sure you were. Torrey, in your research of dogmen after having that experience, have you heard about all these people who have seen what they call wolf apes in various areas like Kentucky and Tennessee? Creatures that have what they say were the bodies of gorillas, but they had heads like a wolf.
I never have heard of that name. Maybe I haven't read that far into it. From other people's encounters, I did always wonder if they kind of saw, like, if the description was the same as what we saw. I think with the body being as built as it was, but still having hair, and then, like the legs of a dog, but just huge, and with the head, so I don't think it would be necessarily that, but it could be. Maybe I just haven't read into it enough. I should probably try to do more research and find out more.
Oh, that's okay. Ed, you described the dogman you saw as being 12 to 15 feet long. What body parts were you including when you said that?
I was including the whole length. The way that I seen it and where it was positioned on the road. Now, if you look at both lanes of the highway are 12, 15 feet across. This thing was like one of the lanes of the highway.
That's a big one. There have been some really credible eyewitnesses who came forward and talked about seeing 12-foot dogmen. If this one stood up, how tall do you think it would have been?
About 8.5 feet.
Okay, so it wasn't exactly a record breaker, but still, nonetheless, that's pretty big. Do you have any regrets about how you two handled anything that night?
No.
Good. As long as you can look back with no regrets, that's a really good thing. Now that you've seen a dogman, what are your thoughts on Sasquatch?
I believe in him.
How about you, Torrey?
I would say I would believe there's something of that nature out there. I don't really think that it would probably be as vicious. It sounds like there are more attacks from dogmen in different areas than there are of Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Then again, it could be the other way around, depending on the area and depending on how many are in one area and how many people are in that area of the population, or if it's more woods or if it's more people, houses. I guess, it just depends on the area, the environment too, probably.
I take it if you had your druthers and had to have an encounter with one of the two, you'd pick a Sasquatch every time?
Yes.
Yeah, that doesn't make you any different from most eyewitnesses, and for good reason. Ed, you were smelt fishing with a girlfriend one time when you had an unusual experience. Please tell us about it.
I was out smelting, and I spent the night out there because we usually would sit out there for a few nights and camp, and we'd go smelting with our nets late at night. We'd shine a really bright spotlight in the creek, and you could see them a lot easier at night. Well, we retired to the tent that night, me and my girlfriend, and we heard a bunch of branches breaking and got a really, really bad, awful smell that came through our tent. And then I seen the shadow. It's the shadow of like a man, but no man that I've ever seen before. And I didn't know there was anybody else around. So I never opened the tent. I guess I didn't want to. And it eventually left and went away, but it was just really, really creepy.
From what you heard inside the tent that night, do you think there's any way that could have been just a person creeping around outside your camp, or are you convinced it had to be some form of either a Sasquatch or a Dogman?
I've never met anyone in my life that would be that broad-shouldered, or that stinky for that matter.
I don't know, Ed. Some of the people I know, no, I'm not going to go there. I totally understand. Well, we're about out of time. Before we get out of here, do you two have any closing comments you'd like to share? If you do, Torrey, you please go first.
I guess I would just say if anybody came upon something like that, make sure you don't try to approach it, as I'm glad we didn't. But other than that, I would say hopefully people keep sharing their encounters from everywhere around the world that see them.
That sounds like good advice. How about you, Ed?
If you were to ever approach a Dogman, do it from a safe distance, and don't go out on old Michigan country roads at night by yourself, walking aimlessly through the dark, and always find some way to protect yourself.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of people do that. Well, I can't tell you two how much I appreciate you coming on and sharing that experience with us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, you know you're welcome. Thanks again for your time. Have a great night.
You too.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll see ya.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye. Our guest for tonight's second segment's come on the show several times in the past. Most recently, he came on episode 211 and told us about his most recent encounter in a place called the Devil's Punchbowl in California. Well, after he came on and did that show, two of his friends had Dogman encounters of their own, and that's what he's come on to tell us about tonight. Dan, welcome back.
Good to be here, Vic. Thank you.
Well, you know you're welcome. Thank you for your time. Dan, as fate would have it, you have two friends who recently had Dogman experiences of their own. What can you tell us about your friends and also about their experiences?
Well, the first one that I'd like to talk about is Julie. She is a retired United States Air Force security police. And this encounter happened up in Solvang, California, which is in Santa Barbara County. It was at a wilderness park that's on the outskirts of the town of Solvang. And it is a large park, and I've been there before myself. And she was there in regards to a family gathering that they had at the park for a birthday for one of the family members. And she had all of her extended family there as well. And everything was going great. They had a nice time there during the birthday celebration. And it happened about 5:30 at night, or, it was just getting dusk. They started breaking down everything and putting stuff in the cars. She had parked at the north end of the park, away from everybody, because there wasn't that much left for parking. And just to give you an idea of what it looks like, there's trees on both sides of the green area where they were, with the grass and so forth. And it was, like I said, about 5:30. And the other family members had loaded up and headed out already, so they were the last two in the park. It was Julie and her 16-year-old daughter, Kendra. And as they were finally putting everything away in their truck, Julie saw a large shadow walking through the trees on the east side of where they were. And it was moving. And Kendra saw it too. And Kendra said, "Mom, do you see that?" And, she said yes. As it got toward the edge of the trees and started to come out toward the green grass area, they could see what it was. And it was a large male Dogman. And Julie told me it was about 6.5 to 7 feet tall. Very large, broad shoulders, long arms, tapered waist, and then had dog-like legs with the hocks. And it also had a tail. And it had amber eyes. You can see the amber eyes shining in the night. And I believe the moon was out, she told me. And she is full-blood Shoshone Indian. And they revere the wolfman-type personages in their tribal legends. And they refer to that as Esau. And she started to back up and take Kendra with her and put Kendra behind her. And she said, "Get behind me, sweetie." And Kendra got behind her mother. Julie pulled her pistol. She didn't point it at the creature. She just pulled it out and had it ready in case she needed to. But she told me, and I've never heard this before, she started to speak toward the creature in her native language, in Shoshone. And she said that the creature, instead of advancing toward them, stopped and just stood there and watched them. And while this was going on, Kendra got into the back seat of the truck, and then Julie got in the front seat of the truck and turned it on, and they started to take off. And the Dogman just stood there watching them with his eyes, and they left the park. And before this happened, Kendra and Julie said that they heard a loud scream, and it sounded like a cat, and it was very brief. And it was like they heard it, and they both looked at each other like, "What was that?" And Kendra said, "That sounded like a cat, Mom." And she said, "Yeah, it sure did." And then right after that is when they saw the Dogman. And she went back home. She told her husband, who's also a deputy sheriff, his name is Bobby. And the next day, both Bobby and Julie went back out to the park to see the location and stuff and to look for any evidence. And they found a dead cat that had been stripped clean from the head down of all the meat. And the only thing that was left was a skeletal mane, a tail, and a head. So apparently the Dogman had killed the cat right before Julie and Kendra had their encounter. And they looked for footprints, but the ground was too hard to find any footprints. But they did find the carcass of the dead cat. And that was basically the end of Julie's encounter.
Since Julie has Shoshone heritage and Dogman legends are a big part of their heritage, do you think that made it easier for her to deal with seeing one, or harder?
I think it made it easier for her because as soon as this happened, she had the presence of mind, being a retired cop, to take care of her daughter first, get her behind her, pull her weapon in case she had to use it, but she also had the presence of mind to speak to this creature in her native language. She thinks that when she did that, it made the creature stop and just stand there and look at them. And she was basically telling the creature, "Esau, please stop. Do not harm me and my child. Let us go in peace." And it must have worked because nothing happened after that.
Oh, well, hopefully that did help in some way.
No, I think it did. I really did, because I've never heard that before in any encounter where somebody's used their tribal language to hold back a Dogman. And when she did that, it really surprised me, but she had the presence of mind to try that, and I think it worked.
That's one of the frustrating things about it. We'll never know if the language that she shared that day actually did make a difference in holding it back, or if it was just going to stand there and look at her anyway. All we can do is guess, of course, but it does make you wonder.
Yeah, it does. I think she's right. I really do, because I trust her judgment. She's a really good girl, and she's a professional, and I think it really worked, because otherwise, who knows what that Dogman would have done. It could have went after him before they got in the truck, but it didn't. It stayed there in the trees, on the outskirts of the trees, and just watched.
Yeah, thank goodness it responded that way. Since it didn't come after Julie or Kendra, it wasn't the most traumatic encounter, but do you know if she shared her experience with elders to try and deal with seeing it?
Yes, she did. She went directly to the elders that she knows and then asked them what their opinion was. And they all said that, yeah, you saw Esau and he listened to what you were saying to him and he basically obeyed your request. And they just said that it's not often that you see these creatures, but you had this encounter and you dealt with it appropriately. And the only thing that she said was, and it's like I said last time about what I'm going to continue to do when I go out, is I get smudged with sage before I go out anymore. And they told her, yeah, that's a good idea that you should do that. So, yeah, but the elders were informed, and they told her that she did the right thing.
It sure sounds like it. I'm so glad she kept a cool head.
Oh, yeah. She's a good cop, and she is a professional, and she did the right thing, I think.
Sure sounds like it. What can you tell us about your friend Jack's experience?
Jack is a Marine Corps veteran, and he is currently a game warden in one of the East Coast states of the United States. His encounter happened a few months ago, and of all places, it was in Sleepy Hollow, New York. He was there for the military gets 30 days paid leave every year. He was there on leave, visiting family there, his aunt and uncle. And he's a hard-charging Marine, not scared of anything. He was out, and he does this every day. He does road work, he calls it, when he goes out and jogs, like 5 or 10 miles each day. He's in terrific shape. And he went out one night to do that. He didn't have a chance to do it early in the morning like he usually does, because he was busy with some family matters and celebrations. But that night he said, well, I wanted to go out and do a run because I don't feel right if I don't do one. And, it makes sense, with him being a Marine. So he went out there and he's jogging down one of the streets down in Sleepy Hollow. And Sleepy Hollow is a town that is surrounded by forest and trees, and it has a spooky reputation because of the Washington Irving Headless Horseman stories. And if you've ever been there at night and you see the fog rolling in and so forth, it gets pretty creepy. And even he admitted, yeah, it was kind of creepy going out there at night. He's used to running in the daytime, early in the morning, but he done the run at night this time. So as he was on his run, he was going through one part of the highway that was leading outside the city, and it started to get foggy, and he just felt like he was being watched. He got that sense that something's watching me. And being a Marine Corps veteran, that is honed into you when you're in combat. You can easily pick it up if, something doesn't feel right. And he gets very quiet before it happens. That's exactly what happened with Jack. Jack was on his run, and then he got to this certain point next to the forest where it got extremely quiet, and that's when his quote-unquote spidey sense came up, and he could sense that something was up. So he kind of slowed down, and then he stopped to rest, and he was next to a tree stump along the side of the road. All of a sudden, he heard some rustling in the woods, in the bushes and so forth, and he looked out from his position where he was, and there was one of those old style telephone poles that has a light on it along the road. And he looked out over there and he could hear the commotion in the brush and so forth that was close to there. And he looked out on the highway and out came from right out of the bushes a Dogman. And he was totally illuminated by the light that was on the telephone pole. He could see everything. He described it as 7 feet tall, black in color. He could see the eyes shine from the light pole that it was standing under. He had grabbed hold of the light pole with his right arm, and he said arm, and he said it had 2 arms and 2 legs. And that seemed like he was out of breath. He was panting. And then he assumed that it was probably chasing something, the way it was acting. And then it also came down to a tapered waist with dog-style legs with the hocks. And it also had a tail. And it stood there underneath the telephone pole with a light. Probably, he said, about a minute. And then he stopped panting. The creature stopped panting. And then he ran across the road one big leap. It took him one leap across the road. He hit the middle of the road, and then he was on the other side. And he was gone. He ran into the other side of where the location was. And he just was dumbfounded, and he was also scared. Now, I've never heard Jack say he'd been scared of anything, okay? He said this creature scared the pee out of him, okay? He got back to the home, aunt and uncle's home, and told them what he saw. Because as soon as this happened, he started running back to the house. And he told his aunt and uncle what happened. Now, he said they believed him. They said, well, if you said you saw it, Jack, you saw it. You know, we're not going to say that you didn't see what you saw. And they said, well, we're pretty sure you're not going to make something up like that. And he wouldn't, because he's an honorable man, Marine Corps veteran, and now he's a law enforcement officer or game warden in an East Coast state. And Jack is a really good man. I know him personally. He's been a friend of mine for many years. And I totally believe what he saw. When he described it to me, I said, that's exactly what I saw, you know, on my second encounter, except the coloring of the fur was different. And he goes, Dan, I've never been scared like that in my life. And I just saw that. And the first thing he said he thought was the Wolfman in Van Helsing. He said that looked exactly like that, the big black one at the end of the movie. He said, Dan, I thought I was going crazy. I said, I couldn't believe what I was seeing in front of me. But he did the right thing. He left the area and ran back home and let his relatives know what he saw.
From what I understand, Jack went out to the place where he had his encounter the next day to look for evidence. Do you know if he found anything?
He sure did. He found an 8-inch print, a wolf print, that was 8 inches long and it was 4 inches wide. And he found like a couple of them, but you could tell by the gait and the length between the footprints that it was bipedal. It was not on all fours because of the way the prints were. And yeah, he found that evidence. That's a big wolf man with that kind of measurements for the feet.
Of course, he could have tried to fool himself into believing that it was just some kind of a hallucination. Maybe he was just seeing things the night before, but when he went out there the next day and found those prints, that really had to be a slap in the face, wasn't it?
It was. He said that just backed up what he saw the night before. And he said, I know what I saw. I saw evidence of what I saw. And no one's going to tell me otherwise. And he said the reason he came and told me the story is because I put out what happened to me this second time, my second encounter. And I put it out to a lot of law enforcement friends of mine that I love and trust. And I said, if any of you have any similar stories like this, let me know. And that's what happened. Julie let me know, and Jack let me know. So far, those are the only two that have, but nothing in my knowledge of my friends. Something tells me that I'll probably get more. But that's exactly why Jack told me his encounter, and Julie too. They said, well, Dan, you know, you've had two, and no one else that we know has ever had any at all. So they felt comfortable coming to me and telling me their stories.
Well, I'm so glad they knew about your experience and consequently where to go to share their experiences. And by the way, Dan, the fact that you have 4 friends who have had their own Dogman encounters, that really is a bittersweet type of situation. It's sweet in a way because, wow, you could always say, I know 4 people who have had Dogman encounters. It's bitter because, oh, I know 4 people who have had Dogman encounters. Do you follow me?
I sure do, yeah. One hand, it's good because they've come forward and told what they have seen. On the other hand, they went through the horror of actually seeing this creature. And I totally get what you say. And it's 100% correct.
It really is a shame that anyone has to go through an experience like that.
That's why I came forward with you, Vic. It's going to be a year ago this month that I told you about my first encounter. And since that time, I had that second encounter in California. And it's, oh boy, it doesn't leave you. You always have thoughts and even dreams about what's happened. I still can't get the low moaning howl from the second encounter out of my mind. It always pops up. And I'm never going to forget that. That low moaning howl is the one that scared me the most. And I know that my friends have their own experiences and how they feel about what they've seen.
Well, I'm sure you never will get the sound of that howl out of your head. How could you?
No, and I told you I was going to give you an update on Patty and Michelle, who shared that encounter with me. Patty has been doing her research on Dogman. She's listened to the show on a number of occasions, and I think she's trying to wrap her head around what happened and doing that research. Michelle moved to Australia for a bit, so I haven't heard too much from her since the encounter. I mean, I've shared a couple of emails and stuff with her, but she hasn't said anything about researching yet. So I hope it wasn't the fact that she had the encounter and then had to flee to Australia because she's living with her sister there. I hope she comes back because I miss her, being a friend since elementary school. But she needs to realize that they've had Dogman encounters down in Australia as well. So, you can run, but you can't hide, basically.
Unfortunately, you can't. It's too bad, too. Well, Dan, I want to thank you so much for coming back on and updating us about those experiences your friends had.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Vic. I wish they hadn't had that encounters that they had, but since they wanted me to let other people know what they've seen, this is a public service that you provide, and I think it's a well-deserved public service.
Well, thanks for saying that, and like we talked about several times in the if those two ever decide that they'd like to reach out to me for help, then yeah, I'm always here and glad to do it. Of course, like we talked about as well, they don't have to come on the show to talk with me about their experiences. I'd be more than happy to help any way I could.
Oh, I've let them know, Vic, and I've also let Julie and Jack know about the show. They hadn't heard about the show until after this happened and heard about my encounter, so they've been listening to the show as well. Both of them have. They've told me. And I've told them the same thing. If they want to talk to you about their encounters, feel free to contact you. And I think in time, they probably will.
Well, that sounds good. As you know, I'll be here. Dan, thank you so much again for your time. Have a great night.
Thank you, Vic. Bye-bye.
Bye. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.